Point it right at your face.
Okay, like this?
At your chin. Put it on your chin.
Put it on your chin.
Officially,
What kind of hair? Is that okay? Does that block anyone?
Are you there? Okay. I'll probably need some reminders. So Matthew reached out to me and asked if I would speak, and I was like, so I gave him some options. My first option was you can advertise it as a ladies' Bible study. And then I gave him another option, which was I could share my testimony. I gave him another option, which was you could just give me a different job. And then, so I come today in the authority of option B, which was teaching why women shouldn't teach. And on top of that, I decided to come in costume. Any guesses? Western and Annie Oakley. Who's Annie Oakley? Sharpshooter. Anybody know any details about Annie Oakley?
They named the sunglasses after her.
Oh, did they?
No,
She dated Wild Bill.
She what?
Dated Wild Bill.
Bill. Oh, the Buffalo Bill, right? Yeah, Buffalo Bill. So she like rose to the Buffalo Bill show, right?
She
Yeah.
didn't know that she could just do as well as they could.
Yeah, so she was in like a shootout and she creamed the guy and then she married him. And then she vowed that she would never outshoot or outshine him again. And so that's my heart today. So if my husband wasn't behind me, my husband has like very little ego, and he said, you know what, you should just go. He's full of encouragement, and he said, maybe they'll poke holes in your teaching and you'll learn something. I was like, okay. So that's why I'm here. And my heart is that we all, as the body, learn to move as one. And so giving proper weight to the text and be honest with it so that we can become one, right? One in mind. So that's my heart. So I just pray, I just commit this time to our Father who calls us all sons of God. And he just loves us so much. And so, yeah, thank you, Father. Okay, so we're going to jump right into the controversy in 1 Timothy 2, 11 to 14. It says, let a woman learn quietly. So no, let a woman learn. Let a woman learn quietly. The word hesukia, with all submissiveness. I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet. Hesukia. So some people say this is like a cultural thing, right, of their time. But it doesn't really make sense because the next verse is, for Adam was formed first, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. Yet she will be saved through childbearing, if they continue in faith and love and holiness with self-control. So, I'm going to just deal with this childbearing thing because it's kind of like weird. I was like, okay, so if you don't have kids, you don't get saved. That's weird, right? Okay, but here, let's think about this. Okay, so if the verse 14, it says, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman, okay, let's start 13 actually. For Adam was first formed, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman. Who's the woman? Eve. Eve was deceived and became a transgressor, yet she, who's the she? Eve will be saved through childbearing. So how would Eve be saved through childbearing? Her seed, right? The seed of the woman, right? So, yet she will be saved through childbearing, but then watch the switch. Then it goes to plural. If they continue in faith, love, holiness, with self-control. So how I'm reading that is that Eve would be saved through childbearing of the offspring, and then us too are now included in the rest of the phrase, all women, if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with self-control. That's how I'm reading that. Okay? So, back to the first part. So let a woman learn quietly with all submissiveness. I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over man, but she is to remain quiet. Let's just go to the next one too. I'm going to put 1 Corinthians 14:26 on the table. It says, how is it then, brethren? Okay, so I called us all sons of God already. Now it says brethren. Why doesn't it say sistren? Any takers? Why doesn't it say sistren? Why aren't we called daughters?
That's the whole B'nai Israel.
Yeah, so it's an inclusive, like those terms are inclusive of females, right? So men are kind of like the face or the representative, right? And like you can see this also in genealogies, like they seem to be the representatives, right? Okay, so how is it then, brethren, whenever you come together, each of you has a song. No, each of you has a song, a teaching, a tongue, a revelation, an interpretation. Let all things be done for edification. So why do we come together?
To edify one another.
To edify, right? So not one-upping, but we're one another-upping, right? That's why we're here. So, if anyone speaks in a tongue, let there be 2 or 3 at most, each in turn, and let one interpret. But if there's no interpreter, let him keep silent. Okay, so this is a different word here. Don't mind my Greek. I did listen to the Strong's pronunciations, but sometimes they're different than what I hear, so I don't know. Sigao, and it can also mean to hold one's peace. Okay, so let them hold their peace in church, and let him speak to himself and to God. So if it was silent, then why would the next phrase be, let him speak to himself and to God? I mean, arguably he could speak to himself in his head, but possibly it does just mean to hold your peace quietly, right? So you speak quietly. But, okay, so let 2 or 3 prophets speak and let the others judge. Okay, we're gonna hold on to that, let the others judge. But if anything is revealed to another who sits by, let the first keep silent. Ciego. For you can all prophesy, one by one, that all may learn and that all may be encouraged. And the spirits of the prophets are subject to the prophets. For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. And in all the churches of the saints, let your women keep silent in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but they are to be submissive, as the law also says. And if they want to learn something, let them ask their own husbands at home, for it is shameful for women to speak in the church. Or you could say ecclesia, or maybe even Kyriakos, Greek, you can check it out, 1 Corinthians 11:20, those separated unto God. Okay, so there are apparently some minority textual critics that say that the verses 34 and 35, so there's something called a gloss or like an annotation. So in Trinitarian doctrine, I don't know if you guys have ever seen, people will go to 1 John 5:7, and it talks about there are 3 that bear witness as in heaven, and people will say, well, that's a gloss. So it was from the margins, like it's somebody's notes that made it into the text. And so some people say, and I haven't seen a photograph of the text, so I can't say, but there's a minority that say 34 and 35 were added, and that it flows very nicely from 33 to 36. So the controversial verse is, let your women keep silent, or keep one's peace in the churches, for they're not permitted to speak, but they're to be submissive as the law says. And if they want to learn something, let them ask their husbands at home, for it's shameful for a woman to speak in the church. Okay. So it could be a gloss. We will be, okay, and I'm going to show you in 1 Corinthians 11 when we go to the head covering chapter, which is a couple chapters earlier. So this is all about like when we come together, the order of things. And we're going to see there that women can absolutely pray and prophesy. So for it to come along here and say now we have to be silent, it doesn't really make any sense. And even in this own place here in verse 31, it says, for you can all prophesy one by one. So it doesn't really seem to fit the text. And even earlier in verse 26 and 27, it said anyone, and it said each of you, right? So, and the other thing that's a little bit weird is like, what if a woman doesn't have a husband? So she can't ask questions? right? Or she maybe has to ask her friend to go ask her husband. Like, it's going to get kind of complicated. Or what if the husband isn't a believer? Or what if the husband isn't as spiritually mature? Or, not gifted with teaching or understanding. So, and there's also this, apparently they had like a segregation of the females and males in the first century. And so it would kind of be like the women in the nursery, on the intercom through the window, like, hey, blah, 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 or whatever, right? And it's very interruptive. So some people say this is dealing with that. I wasn't sure about that view because of the rest of the context, but otherwise it kind of makes sense. So I haven't quite put my fork in it, but the part where it says, let the others judge, this view is that, so the Myers, we always seem to be traveling with Myers everywhere. We went to this feast up in the Okanagan, and the main guest speaker, Rabbi Stanley, who I later actually asked, you mind if I just call you Stanley? He was actually on the Facebook thread, and he don't like that. He did not like that. So anyway, so I'm not sure, I was like, okay, does this at what point is a meeting not a meeting? I don't know, I'm just saying, I was kind of like, there were some things that were said that to me were very fundamentally bothersome. So I was kind of like up there like, and so this let them judge. Some people are saying that the judgment falls to the men. So to have like a woman that's probing and weighing in and that kind of thing, sifting, evaluating, that's supposed to be like the men's position, right? And I was doing it, so if that's the answer, I'm guilty. And then the other thing about this passage is it says, as it says in the law also, and I was like, okay, why does it say that? So it says, let your women keep silent in the churches, for they're not permitted to speak, but they are to be submissive. And all I could think was that where it says, but they are to be submissive, as the law also says, is that that's specifically talking about the submissive part, and not the part where it says, for they're not permitted to speak. So I'll read that again. For they are not permitted to speak, but they are to be submissive, as the law also says. Because if we think of the law as in, like Moses' writings, the first 5 books, and not like a specific commandment, but like an overall tone, we were told, right, that Sarah said, called Abraham Lord, and it was counted to her for righteousness. So there's like an embodiment of a submissive woman in those kinds of texts, right? So that's kind of how I'm reading that part about the law. Okay, we're gonna keep moving. 1 Corinthians 11:2 forward. We're gonna get into the head covering thing. So, now I praise you, brethren, and we're gonna circle back to that first passage, so that's kind of like the kingpin. But now I praise you, brethren, that you remember me in all things, and keep the traditions just as I delivered them to you. But I want you to know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. So the question is head authority, or is it just source? Because so there's a group of people, they're called egalitarians, and they think everything gender is equal, okay? And they would say that it's just strictly source, so there's no authority implied, okay? And we know about false dichotomies, so it could easily be both, right? Okay, so the head, in Greek, kephale, can be a literal head, or it can be a metaphorical anything, so like a supreme, chief, prominent. So we're going to just hold our finger there in 1 Corinthians 11:2, and we're just going to make the target a little bigger. We're going to go to Ephesians 22 and 23. It says, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. So my grandma told me that he's the head, but we're the neck. And then I got old enough to read this, I was like, Grandma, have you read your Bible? Because like that would make men the neck of Christ. I was like, Gramma failed. Okay, so, okay, we're going to get a little bigger. 1 Peter 3, 1-7. Submission to husbands. Wives, likewise be submissive to your own husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, they without a word may be won by the conduct of their wives. And when they observe your chaste conduct, accompanied by fear, do not let your adornment be merely outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, putting on fine apparel, but rather let it be in the hidden person of the heart, with the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. For in this manner, in former times, so this is what I referred to, so in former times, back to as the law says, the holy women who trusted in God also adorned themselves, being submissive to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. This really made me laugh, because right away I was like, Lord Ryan. I'm like, oh yeah, I can have some fun with that, Lord Ryan. You know, and then I was like, okay, we could really bring back some culture, because we're supposed to greet each other with holy kisses. I was like, we could be really peculiar, guys. That would be really funny, right? I think we should try it. I think we should have a theme where we all call each other, our husbands, Lord, and we kiss each other. Okay. All right. So whose daughter? Okay, I'll back up. As Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are, if you do good and are not afraid with any terror. A word to husbands. Husbands, likewise, dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the wife. This is so culture, it's so funny. Give honor to the wife as the weaker vessel. I was actually just talking to John last night at the dinner table about women in combat roles. And yeah, it's a really bad idea. Really bad idea. These bodies, so I'm not promoting this guy, okay? I'm actually not going to say his name, but there's this thing called Change My Mind, and I saw, they go to the college campus, and the big topic they put on the table was women should not be in combat roles. They're trying to change the minds of the youth, which is a great idea. And he goes through all the stats of how women's bone density and everything is so much less, right? And now with the woke agenda, they're lowering all the standards in all of our combat positions, and it's getting so dangerous because you're putting everybody at risk. And yeah, and I heard it said, I don't want no firewoman carrying me down no ladder. Anyway, that could be hazardous, right?
Yes.
I actually watched this clip. I was telling Archie about it because during the pandemic, there's these two female cops, and there's a 15-year-old guy on the ice that's not going to mask up outside, and he's just he's on his ice skates, right? This is in Alberta, and he's holding his own, and thankfully they didn't, go to their only real power, but they're trying to wrangle him. These two female cops on a teenage boy, and it was so sad. I was like, oh man, this is so sad. Anyway, okay, so the woman is the weaker vessel. And as being heirs, I'm just saying that it's a bodily thing. I don't think we're weaker in spirit. I don't think we're weaker in some other respect. It's a bodily thing. And as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered. Okay, we're going to slide over Colossians 3:18-21. Wives, submit to your husbands, as is fitting to the Lord. Husbands, love your wives, and do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. So you can see here, it's the admonition is to fathers to not be harsh with their wives and to not provoke the children. It seems to me kind of insinuate a little more authority for the man. And then the next phrase, I don't want to skip it because it says bondservants or slaves, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. And I'm going to get back to that because that's called the slavery objection, and I'm going to cover it. Okay, so we're going to go back saucily to 1 Corinthians 7, 3-5. Okay, so we know men have the authority in the home, but is that at all contextual? Okay, the husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, And likewise, the wife to her husband. For the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife. So do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer. It's all good. I think this is a really good idea, and I actually know somebody who's actually doing this, which is really cool. But then come together again, so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. So, in the master bedroom, it is fair game. Okay, dilate. We're going to go to Ephesians 5:24, and I love this passage so much. It says, now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives, as Christ loved the church, and he gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her. How? Having cleansed her by the washing of the water with the word. Why? So that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. And in the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and what I'm saying, that it refers to Christ and the church. However, let each of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. Okay, so the mystery of marriage, which is a title actually of a great book, I recommend, by Mike Nason. But the mystery of marriage, it's found in the relationship between Christ and the Kyriakos, Ecclesia, the church, in love and submission. So marriage is founded at creation with Adam and Eve, and in salvation. So we got to represent, right? So now we're going to roll over and kind of switch gears here to Romans 13, and I'm going to tell a tale of the covenantal nature of government. So we're going to talk about some imprisoned pastors, starting with our Messiah, obviously, and Paul, who said in 2 Timothy 1:8, do not be ashamed of me, his prisoner. So there was a guy in Alberta, that's Canada's Texas, for those who don't know. Supposed to be. His name was Pastor James Coates. Don't know if you guys have even heard of him. He wouldn't comply with the mandates, so he went in to prison for quite a length. Young guy. There was another guy, a Polish immigrant, Christian pastor Artur Pawlowski. He received over 150 fines from the city of Calgary. He was arrested 10 times, and they spent over $2 million prosecuting him for feeding the homeless out of his private funds. And of course, we have the infamous Matthew Nolan, espionage, and so the definition of a license, okay, because I'm going to talk about John Bunyan. John Bunyan, he was a father and husband. You guys probably know him from the Pilgrim's Progress. He spent 14 years imprisoned, and he could have walked out if he just signed up for a license to preach. But he wouldn't. So this is the definition, one definition of license. Permission from a competent authority to do something that would have been otherwise unlawful to do. And he knew there was nothing unlawful, so he was not going to bend a knee. So he knew we render to Caesar what is Caesar's. We pay taxes, depending on how much and what for. But, and the things that are God to God. I was looking at, comparing Canada, US, because my husband and I have dual citizenship, and you guys really do have some better stuff on the books, right? On the books. Yeah, because I was talking to Michael, and Michael's like, if you look at like actually try to like pinpoint a time where it was like actually lived out the way it was written, you ain't gonna find it. So it looks good on paper, right? But here's the 501c3. That was a stupid move of all the churches in the 60s and 70s. And I think the intention before that was, it was always the separation of church and state was to keep the state out of the church, but not to keep God out of government, right? Like I think that's at least somebody's idea. And then I was looking at the First Amendment. It says Congress should make no law respecting an establishment of religion, nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof. I mean, this stuff looks really good. I was like, man. Anyways, I think I heard Matthew say shekels for shackles or shekels for shekels or something like that. But keep the camel's nose out of the sukkah. Okay. So here's the thing. So government, we are told to obey them. I'll read the passages and then I'll digress. Okay. So Romans 13, 1-7, it says, let every soul be subject to the governing authorities. Exousia, the powers, the governing powers. For there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance or arrangement of God. And those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what's good, and you will have praise from the same. For he is God's minister, the word there, diakonos, which is a deacon or a servant. He is God's minister. So the public government is supposed to be God's minister to us for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. He is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. Therefore you must be subject not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because of this you also pay taxes, for they are God's ministers. There's a different word there. It's, I don't know how to say it, liturgo, I didn't put my notes in how to say it, so liturgos or whatever. Where we get our word liturgy, public ministers, attending continually to this very thing. So render therefore all their due taxes to taxes are due, customs to customs, and fear to whom fear, and honor to whom honor. And 1 Peter 2:13 is like it. Therefore submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether to the king as supreme or to governors, as to those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of those who do good. So these texts never actually give us any explicit reasons to not obey the government. It's just kind of like carte blanche, obey, right? But I would say it's implied because there's a relationship happening, right? So there's terms and conditions of what that government looks like, right? So if Ryan hired, or let's turn around, if Jeff hired Ryan to come finish his tiny house, and he said, build it, do the whole inside out of cypress, and I'm going to give you 10 G's, and whatever the agreement was, and then Jeff shows up, and Ryan used the naughty pine, and things were looking a little sideways. Jeff's not obligated to pay, right? So that's how these things work, right? There's terms and conditions built in, and I would say it's the same for women, right? So we don't have to endure abuses of authority. Children do not have to endure abuses of authority, right? So, okay, pop quiz. I've got 4 epistles: Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, Philemon. Does anybody know what those are grouped together and called? Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and Philemon. They were called the prison epistles because Paul wrote them from prison, and he was disobeying Romans 13 that he wrote. How about the Hebrew names of Daniel's friends? Anybody?
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
No, those are the Greek.
Some of them.
I know. I just said it.
Okay.
You say.
Ananiah.
Uh-huh. Azariah. Mishael.
Mishael.
Yeah. Woo! Not a prize, but Okay. Yeah, so obviously they also weren't obeying. And then we have Acts 5:19. It says, a messenger or an angel of the Lord opened the prison doors and brought them, the apostles, out, and basically told them to go do exactly what the powers had told them not to do. So even YHUH himself is advising some resistance. Okay. Here's another question. Will we go down with government if we comply with their fault?
Yes.
Jeremiah 15:4, I will hand them, speaking of Israel, over to trouble. That was Jeremiah 15:4. To all kingdoms of the earth because of Manasseh, the son of Hezekiah, king of Judah, for what he did in Jerusalem. So here is just one text that shows that they were being held accountable on behalf of their leaders. So I don't think doing nothing is actually an option, right? So I was in all my reading. I also read on the Black Robe Regiment, which was just kind of interesting. And I didn't get far enough to know like were these guys legit or not. But what I did note was that the pulpits are withered in this country. Like there's no steel left in any of the men. I know not any, but speaking blanket here. And also while we're there. Nehemiah 8:4, did you guys know there's actually a wooden pulpit in scripture? Okay, you did. Okay. No news. Okay. So we're all going to stand alone, husbands, wives. We can't hide behind each other, right? There's no hiding place. We have to be open. Abigail knew this. She was wise. She was submissive, but she had to do what she had to do, right?
Yep.
And God blessed her for that, right? So that is, Proverbs 28 says, those who forsake the law praise the wicked, but such as keep the law, they contend. And if you look that up, gara, it means they cause strife. They stir up, they meddle, they strive. It says they contend with the wicked. So our God, our Elohim, YHUH, he is a man of war. And we are his battle axe. And he trains our fingers for battle. Right? And we open our mouths wide and he fills it. He makes our mouth like the pen of a ready writer. Our tongue like the pen of a ready writer. Right? So we don't use carnal weapons. Right? We use praise, we use prayer, and we parse. The 3 P's. Praise, prayer, parse. Okay, now I'm going to go back to Colossians 3:22 and tie up the slavery objection. Okay, so the premise is, let me just read it again. Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting to the Lord. Husbands, love your wives, don't be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not provoke your children lest they become discouraged. And bondservants or slaves, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but with sincerity, fearing the Lord. Okay, so the premise is, if wifely submission is like cross-cultural, and it's for all time, then slavery, and this is in the context of Roman slavery, which I'm sure was not good, I'm guessing. I didn't actually look at that, but it was Roman. Okay, so that would be binding for all time, okay? Like it's like a parallelism or they're interconnected. Okay, so here's a little bit of philosophy. I was reading about Aristotle, and he promoted that the reason for both slavery and female subordination was the same. And it was not ethnicity based, he said, but he said it was based on the soul of individuals. He reasoned that those who are slaves have inferior reason and control of their passions. And when I first read this, I was like, what a moron. And I just want to say, I don't know if you guys know this, but moron is a totally scriptural, appropriate term that we should be promoting. Because the foolish virgins were morons. Look it up. They were morons. Okay, so I was like, Aristotle, he's a moron. Okay, but then I was like thinking about this, and then I was like, because I had watched this program with my son Oswald, and it was on the Cherokee, and the Cherokee, they were in like Northern Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, and they were one of the tribes that integrated, okay, with the settlers. And they learned all the language and they learned all the ways. And when the government, or the state of Georgia in particular, I think, started to like try to confiscate their land, they took it to the Supreme Court because they had learned all the ins and outs. And they actually won. They won. But the Supreme Court didn't put in their I don't know, details that, you know, the limitations of what could be done about it. So now I would say it was Andrew Jackson at the time, mid-1800s, and he basically used the Indian Act or whatever, and he got Congress's approval, and I would say that he bypassed like the intent of that ruling. So here's the thing, okay, because sometimes we do things that are legal, right, but obviously not lawful, right? So I'd say he bypassed the intent of that ruling, and they just moved them. It's called the Trail of Tears. You can read about it, and they all got removed over to. And even though they actually outsmarted the system, because really, I think the real answer is probably gunpowder for all the slavery, right? Is like, now obviously, YHUH is bigger and stronger than gunpowder, and so he's going to have the last say, right? And there's going to be lots of treasures for people who suffer for his name's sake properly, right? But here's the thing. Okay. So the thing is yes, slavery, children, women, they're all given directives about submissive, but is the reason for their submissiveness the same? No, it's not the same. So we got apples, oranges, and bananas in one big bowl. And because we know that wives, when someone finds a wife, they find a treasure, they find a good thing, and that it's a blessing. But we know that the slavery that's gone on has basically been out of acts of evil and very unfortunate circumstances, right? So it's totally different, the reasons why those passages would be there. And the other thing about it is, if you use this as a parallelism to get rid of women being submissive, then you also get rid of children obeying their parents, because that was like the third clause, right? So anyway, I think it's kind of like, I think when they got captured in Babylon, I think they were told like, just go. So sometimes Yahweh might say fight, and sometimes he might say go. And so that's how I'm reading that. Okay, so I don't think it's a good argument against women being submissive. Okay. All right, we're going to pick back up in 1 Corinthians 11:4. Every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonors his head. So in the Greek culture, they had togas, right? And the togas had like a lot of material around the necks. So they had like built-in coverings. And the women's was called a palla, but it was the same. So their hoodies, right, were conveniently located, right? So they had convenience going for them. Verse 5, it says, but every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. For that is one and the same as if her head were shaved. So now I'm going to say there's a distinction here between hair and a covering, right? And here it says it again, for if a woman is not covered, then let her also be shorn. So I think this is totally implying a head covering. But it is shameful for a woman to be shorn or shaved, so let her be covered, right? So there's this group, I don't know if you guys have heard of the 12 tribes of Israel? Gene Spriggs or something, right? We have one on our island. I used to live like 15 minutes away from them. We had lots of fun together. Anyway, so they used to, thankfully they've gotten past this, but they used to have their women wear head coverings all the time, even in the shower. Even in the shower. They had to keep their hair covered, because otherwise they had to shave their head, right? But the crazy thing about it is, did that mean the men never could wear a hat? This is the crazy things that we do. We just read like one side, right? Okay. So, this is referring again to when we come together in the body, the corporate meeting, right? Okay, I'm going to go to, I'm just going to throw a few more things out there about this woman prophesying. So in Luke 2, we had Anna, the prophetess. She didn't depart from the temple, worshiping and fasting, praying night and day. We had Acts 2:17, which was a reverberation of Joel 2:28. Shall come to pass in the last days, says God, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your young men shall see visions. Your old men shall dream dreams. Hey, I just roasted my son yesterday for saying old. I'm sorry, but they said old ladies. My son said old ladies, and I was like, Archie, elderly, polish. I mean, I just realized like it says it here, so I don't know. Anyway, okay. I might have to like semi-apologize. Okay, Acts 27:8-9. It says, on the next day, we who were Paul's companions departed and came to Caesarea, and they entered the house of Philip, the evangelist, who was one of the 7, and stayed with him. Now this man had 4 virgin daughters who prophesied. So we're seeing lots of prophets, women prophets. The Old Covenant, obviously you have Deborah and Judges, Huldah, 2 Chronicles 34, Miriam, Exodus 15. So women clearly prophesy, and they clearly prophesy in the gathering. I was loving Tamara's prophecy. She's a mighty prophet. So let's just reflect from 1 Corinthians 7:6. It says, for if a woman is not covered, let her also be shorn. For it's shameful for a woman to be shorn or shaved, then let her be covered. For a man indeed ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God, but woman is the glory of man. So like, okay. So it doesn't say that woman is not the image of God. It doesn't say that. It says, since he is the image and glory of God, but woman is the glory of man. Okay? So I grew up in Baptist churches, and they love themselves some good Matthew Henry commentary. And Matthew Henry says that the man is essentially the go-between between the woman and God. I was like, what kind of craziness is this? There's some crazy stuff when you start studying. You're just like, what on earth? Like, how did somebody write this? And people were like, okay with this? Like, what? I don't get it. Okay. So anyway, we're not going with Matthew Henry. Okay, so there's that. And then, sorry, I lost my place. Count sheep. I also read that some people say it means that, sorry, I could have skipped this, but that it's a woman's job to fulfill man's desires. That's what it means. I was like, okay, that's really bad. Okay, but here in the text, we have something that I think is viable. If you skip forward to verse 14, it says, does not nature itself teach you that if a man wears long hair, it is a disgrace or a dishonor for him? But if a woman has long hair, it's her glory. So here in verse 14, they're contrasting glory with disgrace or dishonor, right? So like the opposite of honor would be, right? So when it says the woman is the glory of man, so since he is the image and glory of God, but woman is the glory of man, the honor of man. And if you look at 1 Peter 2:17, it says honor all men. And love, there's that word again, brotherhood, love the brotherhood, we're all the brotherhood. Romans 12:10, it says honor one another above yourselves, right? So the other thing is here is I'm just pointing out that, it says men to love their wives, women respect your husbands, women are the glory or the honor of men, but that doesn't negate like a holistic thing either, right? So that's how I'm reading that. Okay, verses 8 and 9. For man was not made from woman, but woman from man. And neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. So that's kind of the reason why. And I like vocabulary. So the word primogeniture, you can look it up. The right of succession belonging to firstborn, eldest, or that one that came first. The men were the primogenitors. For this reason, the woman ought to have, and this part here, hopefully in italics for you guys, a symbol is added with the translator. So it says, for the reason this woman ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. Well, so it could read, for this reason the woman ought to have authority on her head because of the angels. So not necessarily a symbol. So the symbol could be the head covering, but it could also be that she just has authority over her head, like she's putting on her covering or not, right? So you can kind of read that either way. And then when it says because of the angels, there's a few different theories. Some people think because angels could be a person, right? Not necessarily an angelic being. They say it could be like the visitors that were there, so they were showing like the order in their congregation to visitors. Or of course, the fallen, the Genesis 6 Nephilim thing, that they left their habitation and they were kept in chains and they would be like lusting after the women, so they're covering their head, arguably maybe their hair. So there's that. Some say it was showing authority over the good angels because a little bit earlier in this epistle, it talks about us judging the angels. So it was like them showing they had authority. It was a symbol of their authority over good angels. And then there's this one, I kind of like this one. It says, or there's the idea that we should display God's glory only. So men, when they were uncovered, it was a symbol of displaying God's glory. And women, when they covered the glory of man, it left only God's glory uncovered. So like symbolically, it's like an act of submission and glorifying only Yahuwah's glory. Okay. Verse 11, nevertheless, neither is man independent of woman, nor woman of man in the Lord. For as woman came from man, even so man also comes through woman, right? Because you all men aren't really primogenitors, right? Because you're not Adam. Okay, but all things are of God. Okay, and in case you guys don't know, but I don't even know if I have guts to say this, because I thought it was really funny, so I wanted to say this word, but I don't even know if I have guts to say this stupid word. Okay. All right, okay, ready? The Lesbiterians. Okay, the Lesbiterians, they want you to think that Adam was formed genderless. Okay, now here's the theory. Whatever, conjecture, right? Keep an open mind. So, that, when they opened his side to get it, or, it could be rib or side until I read farther, and then I was like, I think it's the rib, but I was like, rib or side, and the feminine side, men have a feminine side. When they opened him up for a little surgery, just did a little extra surgery. That's good. Okay, a little downtown. All right, so you guys judge among yourselves. Is it proper for a woman to pray to God with her head uncovered? Does not nature itself teach you that if a man has long hair, it's a dishonor to him? Like, what in nature, right? What in nature teaches us that? So, this is a good one. Okay, how about balding? I don't know. Okay, so this is the daddy says to the son, you guys either do it or I'm going to do it for you. Okay, but if a woman has long hair, it is her glory, for her hair is given to her for a covering. Some think this is the key verse to unravel 4 and 6, where there is a distinction between the head covering and the hair. But I say, you have to synchronize them without negating them. Okay, so I actually think that head coverings are very beautiful, and I think it's a wonderful practice. I once went to a United, not Lesbiterian, but Presbyterian service, and they had a bucket of hats, and they were outdated, and I was like, okay. So I put one on, and I looked so bad, and I was like, yeah, this is awesome, because now we're like Like, boom, boom, even vanity's going down. Like, yeah. Okay, anyways, we can do it. We can really humble ourselves, right? Okay, but if anyone seems to be contentious, we have no such custom, and nor do the churches of God. So we're not going to make an issue, all right? We're not going to make an issue. Okay, I'm going to skip. I printed these notes at home, and then I got here, and I was like, oh, this is so scrambled. I probably have enough content. Where am I at for time? Okay, because might need a week. Okay, Colossians 4:15. Okay, was Nympha the leader of the house church, or was she just a host? Okay, so give my greetings to brothers at Laodicea and to Nympha and the church in her house. Now, I do want to say from hosting, and I know I met a Nicole that hosted for a long while before she was. Is Nicole here? There is something kind of like responsible about it in your house, like jurisdiction-wise. But you can actually see this in the verse, Acts 17:5-9. You can see that Jason was kind of held accountable for the meetings. And you can see that also right with the pandemic, right? They go for the homeowners. So I wouldn't say you're like an authority necessarily, elder, deacon, that necessarily, but there is some kind of responsibility bearing weight if you are a woman hosting. IMO. Okay. Philippians 4:2-3. It says, I plead with Euodia, and I plead with Suntuke. I think I got those right because I wrote them down. But to be of the same mind in the Lord. Yes, I ask you, my true companion, help these women, since they have contended at my side in the cause of the gospel, along with Clement and the rest of my co-workers whose names are in the book of life. So I think this is kind of weak, but people are using this. If you go back to Philippians 1:1, it says, Paul and Timothy, servants of Christ Jesus, to the saints in Christ Jesus, who are Philippi with the overseers and the deacons. So they say like the premise at the beginning of Philippians is that this is addressing overseers and deacons, and then by the time it gets to 4:2-3, it's talking about these women as overseers and deacons. And I'm like, I don't know. I think it's pretty weak, but there you go. Priscilla and Aquila, her name often mentioned before his. So some people say, like, why is her name always mentioned before? This is so funny. Okay, when I started getting into this women's role thing as I aged, I started realizing we always say mom and dad, right? And then I was like, it should be like dad and then mom. Like obviously, because the man comes, he's the head. So I started writing dad and mom in all my greetings. And I thought I'd risen. Just some understanding, right? I was like, okay, anyway, yeah. Okay, that's not legit. All right, Acts 18:24. Okay, so this is an example where Priscilla's teaching, but it's not public or formally necessarily arguably what I'm doing right now. It's in a conversation. And some people would say the only reason she could do it was because her husband was with her acting as a covering, right? Okay, so I'll leave that to you, but verse 24, now a Jew named Apollos, a native of Alexandria, he came to Ephesus. He was an eloquent man, competent in the scriptures. So this guy's a learned dude. He had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and being fervent in spirit, he spoke and taught accurately the things concerning Jesus. Jesus, so that's scary. So it doesn't scare me, okay? Though he knew only the baptism of John, he began to speak boldly in the synagogue. But when Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they took him aside and explained to him the way of God more accurately. So clearly in conversation, arguably with your husband maybe, but there's women teaching learned men. Was Junia an apostle? Okay, this is Romans 16:7. Greet Andronicus and Junia, my countrymen and fellow prisoners, who are of note among the apostles. So some people are saying that's calling them an apostle, but you could kind of read this inclusively or exclusively, because they were of note among the apostles, she was of note among the apostles, or she was of note among the apostles, right? So, but here's the thing, even if it was her being called an apostle, doesn't necessarily mean she was the apostles, right? Because apostles are sent out one, or missionary, right? So you could call somebody, again, like terms have to be defined, right? Because it's always the context, right? That's going to determine. So you can, either way, it doesn't bother me, but she wasn't one of the foundational apostles that, Ephesians 2:20, that the ecclesia was built on, or Revelation 21, right? Okay, so there is just a note for you, side note, Romans 16:1-16, if you want to see about 10 women being listed in the aiding of Paul's ministry, there's another reference for you. And we're going to move to deacons. Diakonos, servant, minister. The word is used of service in general, but the question is whether it is, again, the office of a deacon, right? So this is really the only viable female in the text, Phoebe. Romans 16:1, it says, I commend you, Phoebe, our sister, who is a deacon, or a servant, of the church in Centuria, that you may welcome her in the Lord in a way worthy of the saints, and help her in whatever she may need from you. For she has been a patron of many, and of myself as well. So the patron there, it's a different word than the deacon, but the Passion Translation actually put in leader. So I'm going to read that part so you got to catch that again. So, for she has been a patron of many, and of myself, Paul, as well. But the leader, she's been the leader of Paul. That's what the Passion says, right? So that word there, prostatus, a woman set over others, a guardian, a protectress, or a care or aid. So she was simply giving an aid. That's what patron means. And obviously, Phoebe could be called a deacon, but the question is whether that fulfills like the office of a deacon, okay? So we're going to go to the passage for the qualifications. Elders and deacons, 1 Timothy 3. This is a faithful saying. If a man desires the position of a elder, of course they have to put bishop, yeah. He desires a good work. An elder then must be blameless, the husband of one wife. No, it's not couple pastors, right? Okay, temperate, sober-minded, good behavior, hospitable, able to teach, not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, gentle, not quarrelsome, not covetous. One who rules his household well, having his children in submission with all reverence. For if a man does not know how to rule his own house, how will he take care of the church of God? Not a novice, lest being puffed up with pride, he fall into the same condemnation as the devil. Moreover, he must have a good testimony among those who are outside, lest he fall into a reproach and snare of the devil. Deacons, likewise, they must be reverent, not double-tongued, not given to much wine, not greedy for money, holding the mystery of faith with a pure conscience. But let them also first be tested, and let them serve as deacons, being found blameless. Likewise, their wives, could be women, you look at the word, they must be reverent, not slanderers, temperate, faithful in all things. Let the deacons, just like it said for elders, be the husband of one wife, ruling their children and their household well. For they who have served well as deacons, for themselves a good standing and great boldness in the faith, which is Christ Jesus. So I was just thinking too, just now, about that like equal authority in the bedroom and this one wife thing, because if we were practicing equal authority over our bodies, I am convinced that polygamy would not be a thing. Just saying. Okay. Yeah, so to me this seems pretty clear that deacons and elders are male. I don't really see how we can wiggle or loophole out of that, or why we'd want to, because he knows better than us, right? And it's awesome to be under his protection, right? So, but we could be called deacons or apostles in some way, but not in that function, right? So that's how I am reading those. Okay, priesthood. Did you know there's lots of priests still? Catholics? Eastern and Oriental Orthodox, Anglicans, Lutherans, they all have them, right? Nah. Okay, so this is really confusing because the English word for priest comes from the Greek word presbyter, which is actually, when I'm saying elder, that's the word it is. So it's not even the word priest, because the word priest is from a different Greek word, or yusei or something like that, or the Hebrew. And I know we all say, I always hear Cohen, but Strong's, this is an example, said Kohen. And I was like, Kohen, okay. Anyway, so, and then the pastor term, you throw that in there, but I'm going to leave all that confusion. But the point is that, again, call everybody what you want, we're talking about functions, right? So, obviously Catholics, they're acting as like mediators, and it's of God's grace, which is pretty deplorable. Okay. 1 Timothy 2, 4 and 5, it says, coming to him, here's where we know where the real priests are. A living stone, rejected indeed by men, but chosen by God, precious, you also, as living stones, are being built up a spiritual house and a holy priesthood. I mean, you guys know all about this. To offer up spiritual, not animal, sacrifices, acceptable to God through YHUH. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness and into his marvelous light. And now we all know in Exodus 19, the priesthood was trying to give it to all, right, all of Israel, but they failed, and they ended up with, I don't think it caught Yahuwah by surprise, but you could call it calamity, maybe. Revelation 5, 9 and 10. It says, and they sang a new song. Worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals, for you were slain by your blood, and you ransomed people for God from every tribe and language and people and nation. And you have made them a kingdom of priests to our God, and they shall reign on the earth. I'll leave you the other two. It's Revelation 1:6 and Revelation 26. I also put in there. So essentially, I'm sure there's a lot of things we can say about a priest, but I think for me, like the biggest, most exciting function is just the no mediator. So therefore, this is Hebrews 10, 19 to 22. It says, therefore, brothers, since we have confidence to enter the holy places by the blood of Yeshua, by the new and living way that he opened for us through the curtain, that is, through his flesh. And since we have a great priest over the house of God, let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, with our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. So it's pretty cool. It's so amazing. This is Hebrews 6:19. We have this sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain. It's so amazing, right? Yeah. It's so amazing. Okay, but what's up with why did it end up being male priests? Okay, so some people, the theory is that because that was their highest ecclesiastical authority in that covenant, that would like transfer in the new covenant to the eldership, like that's like the parallel. But, oh, snap. Really wanted to bring my phone with me. Hold on. Count sheet again. Is my phone over here? 98, 99. Lots of shit in here. Okay. Let me just see here. This is good. This is good. It's worth the wait. Okay. Totally forgot about this. Okay. Now, if we look at Leviticus 21, 16 to 21, it says, Yahuwah said to Moses, say to Aaron, none of your descendants throughout their generations who have a blemish may approach to offer the bread of his God. For no one who has a blemish shall draw near, a man blind or lame, or one who has a mutilated face or lived too long, or, oh, so it's so small, or a man who has an injured foot or an injured hand, or a hunchback, or a dwarf, or a man with a defect in his sight, or an itching disease, or scabs, or crushed testicles. No man of the descendants of Aaron, the priest who has a blemish, shall come near to the offer Yahuwah's offering by by fire. Since he has a blemish, he shall not come near to offer the bread of God. So, it wasn't just male. It was an unblemished, Leviticus 21:14. It says, and he shall take a wife in her virginity, a widow, or he shall take a wife in her virginity, yes, a widow or one divorced, or a woman who's been defiled, or a harlot. These he shall not marry, but he shall take a wife of a virgin of his own people. So, totally pure. Say to them, if any one of your descendants, this is Leviticus 22, 3-6, if any one of your descendants throughout your generations approaches the holy things which the people of Israel dedicate to Yahuwah, while he has an uncleanness, that person shall be cut off from my presence. I am Yahuwah. None of the line of Aaron who is a leper or suffers a discharge may eat of the holy things until he is clean. Whoever touches anything that is unclean through the contact of the dead, or a man who has an emission of semen, shall be unclean until the evening, and shall not eat the holy things unless he has bathed his body in water. So again, he had to be totally ritually pure. So I would argue that this was prophetic. The maleness was prophetic because of that criteria was clearly talking of Yahusha. So that's my take on that. So what about Galatians 3:26-29? It says, for in Christ Jesus you are all sons of God through faith. For as many as you were baptized into Christ have put on Christ. There's neither Jew nor Greek. There's neither slave nor free. There's neither male nor female. For you are all one in Yahusha. And if you are Christ's, then you are Abraham's offspring and heirs according to the promise. So the question with this text is, does this text, again, does it negate the other texts? No, it doesn't negate them, right? So we have to synchronize them, and I would just say this is a salvific thing. This is talking about our standing before him. It's not talking about a governmental structure in a home and in a body, right? So that's how I'm reading that. I'm going to skip that. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up here, and then one more passage here, and then we'll wrap up. Isaiah 3:12. My people, infants, are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, your guides mislead you, and they have swallowed up the course of your paths. So when I was looking at this, somebody was saying that the only difference here between the word one and a creditor was the vowel markings, but I looked it up, and I don't think it's true, but if you guys find out how that's true, just let me know. But the word in Hebrew, like Isa, does not look at all like a creditor, as far as I could find. But I looked it up in the Septuagint, and it says, this is how it reads. O my people, your exactors, that's the word practor, and it is a collector, same as used in Luke 12:58. And extortioners, apateo, rule over you. So, my people, your exactors strip you, and your extortioners rule over you. And this kind of, if you skip down to verse 14, kind of fits, because it says, Yahuwah himself shall enter into judgment with the elders of the people and with their rulers. So Yahuwah is now entering into judgment with the rulers and elders, which would have to be, if it was the other translation, have to be with women and infants. Now, I don't know what's going on, like that discrepancy between the Masoretic and the Septuagint here, but I do know that as much as people push that Masoretic, they keep diverting to the Septuagint, right? Like Psalms 22 and other places. So anyways, I'm not trying to get into that, but I don't actually even have a problem with this if it said your oppressors are, infants are your oppressors and women rule over them as something that would be bad. Doesn't bother me, so long as, I'm gonna just sing you guys a little scripture, 1 Corinthians 16:13. So there's these seed family worship albums that I totally recommend for families, and they just sing scriptures. And the word in this passage, adrizomai, it has the root andros, it means man, because people translate this and they take the man out of this passage, but it says man. It says, be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. So you men, you be strong, and I'm not offended to back down. for today. And I'll, if I don't get knocked out of place before tomorrow, we'll start in Genesis. Thank you, guys.